All right, we're back. This is part 2 of me talking about what's inside the new DM screen that was released for the 2024 edition of Dungeons & Dragons. Again, we still don't know what people are calling it. Some people say 5e24, some people say 2024 D&D, some people say 1D&D. I don't fucking know. Whoever pays me the most can pick what I get to say. That being said, let's hop back into it. We're gonna hop right into the second half of the Dungeon Master screen, which is the right side, and I'll let you guys know what's in it and how best to use it as we go. And also just my general review of it. So far, so good. I think there are definitely some places where it could be improved, but I'll get into that in a little bit. So let's check it out. Hey, this is Diana from the future here, specifically the Diana that's editing this episode right now, here to say that this episode is also brought to you by the amazing folks over at Money Cook Games. That's right, we got sponsored, again. Somehow. It was a little last minute, that's why the setup's so different and the lighting's different and the plants are all like dead and replaced, but as soon as it hit my desk, I had to say yes because this is so up my alley. So if you're into TTRPGs, especially in the horror aspect and the kind that's gonna test your party's limits, stay tuned, that'll be coming up soon. Anyway, back to the normal shit. The right interior section. Again, I know this is super weird that I can't actually show you guys what's in it. Bear with me here, I just want you guys to have a quick overview. It has a list of all the skills that are listed in alphabetical order. So, you know, acrobatics, and then animal handling, and then arcana, and things like that, followed by the skill that it uses. For example, it says acrobatics uses dexterity, animal handling uses wisdom, things like that. So that's all just listed out. I think that's super helpful to have on hand. I feel like it's one of those things that you kind of learn over time when you're a player, but if you're a newer DM, it's good to have on hand as well. I feel like I would have added a blurb in here, or like a little asterisk or something that reminds people that they don't have to use these specific ability scores associated with specific skills. The most common example of this is when DMs use intimidation checks that are strength-based instead of charisma-based. So if you have your party's barbarian go up and start to like bully a shopkeeper into giving them a discount or giving them items for free, that's not gonna be charisma-based. That's gonna be the barbarian picking up a pot and crushing it in their bare hands in order to show off how strong they are. That's still an intimidation check. You're still trying to intimidate, that's the goal, but it's based off of strength. It's not based off of charisma because they aren't talking. They're just making hard eye contact and glaring or something like that. So I feel like there should be a little asterisk or something here, something that just reminds DMs that they don't have to go with that skill and that specific ability check. So it doesn't have to be a intimidation charisma check. It could be an intimidation strength check, but that's okay. They didn't include that. That's just something I feel like people just need to be reminded of in general. So bear in mind, this is flexible, more flexible than it gives off. It has a section on death saving throws. Obviously, you really need that as the DM. This comes up a lot, and obviously, you know, what the different parameters are for that is something that I have personally still not learned. Don't blame me. I'm just a bad DM, but it's something that's one of those really important things that you need to have memorized that is not easy to memorize when you're just starting off. And so having that ready to go is really simple. Now this also has 2 really important sections with regards to objects. It has object armor class and then object hit points. These are 2 tables that are not used enough. You know, if your party's trying to break down a door, you want to know what the AC of that door is and then also what the hit points of that door is depending on the material that it's made of. And this information has all been in the DMG for a while, but having it on the DM screen, I highly approve of. So for example, it says that if it's a small object, like a chest, and it is fragile. So for example, it's made out of a really thin, you know, the ye old equivalent of particle board or whatever, then it would have an average of 3 hit points, 1d6. But if that chest was made of something like steel and it was more resilient, then it might have 10 hit points, you know, and it would be 3d6 worth of hit points if you wanted to roll for it. That sort of information I feel like is really helpful to have, and not a lot of DMs know that that's at their disposal when their party wants to do something like crazy, like tear down a dungeon brick by brick instead of actually going inside and completing the goal, you know? So really helpful, and it's a good tool to have in your back pocket or right in front of you. Next up is something that talks about food, drink, and lodging, and it talks about the kind of like average living costs. So for example, staying at a modest inn might be 5 silver pieces per night, and then a modest meal would be 1 silver piece per person, something like that. It talks about how much a mug of ale costs, a loaf of bread, things like that. It's pretty short. It doesn't have like a bunch of different types of alcohol. It doesn't have names or anything like that, but it gives you a good kind of like starting evaluation point, right? Like it has the difference between fine wine and really common wine, you know? And so you can use those as points of reference for coming up with things on your own and then kind of improvising from there. Really, everything in here is a starting point and it should be treated as such. Next up, we have how difficulty classes work. That's incredibly straightforward. It's always been in the DMG and in the Dungeon Master screen. It says like an example of a very easy task would be a DC of 5, whatever that may be. And then an example of a very hard task would be a DC of 25. So for example, if you're doing a very easy task, such as convincing a family member to loan you 2 copper pieces, the DC is going to be 5. But an example of a very hard task might be breaking through magically strengthened chains with your bare hands, and you're the wizard, or something like that. You know, like it's something that gives you points of reference for roughly how easy or hard an improvised check should be. Next up is a list of light sources. This is actually pretty helpful, and it's kind of one of those like little quality of life things, those realism things that no one really takes into account until someone asks about it. But it says a bunch of different light sources in the game. So for example, a lamp, a candle, a torch, and then it says how much bright light that they shed. So for example, for a torch, it says that it sheds 20 feet of bright light. And then it also says how much dim light it sheds on top of that. So for the torch, not only is it 20 feet of bright light, but then it's another 20 feet of dim light. And then it also says the duration of that light. So a torch only lasts an hour. This is amazing to me. Especially as a dungeon master who runs mostly horror games, I always need to know what the limits of my party's perception is. You know, can they see the thing staring at them from the corner of the room, or is it just out of the radius of their bright light there? Especially when it comes to resource use, if you do count resource use, so like, you know, the fact that a torch only burns for an hour is something that a lot of people forget. And you can, you know, totally hand wave that. You don't have to be the type of DM who tracks this sort of stuff, but if you're anything like me, if you're running certain genres like horror games or thriller games where that matters, this will help a ton with that. So I absolutely love that. In the same vein as that, it does also talk about obscurement, so what a lightly obscured area means and a heavily obscured area means, as well as a bunch of examples. So it says an example of a lightly obscured area might be patchy fog, moderate foliage, and then an example of a heavily obscured area is straight up darkness, heavy fog, dense foliage, things like that. There's only 2 rows on that list because there's only those 2 types of obfuscation. Man, big vocab word there. But it's still helpful to have because I will always forget those rules consistently. It's a canon event. Next up on this last panel, we have a couple of things that have kind of always been here. We have information for travel pace. So it says, you know, if you're going at fast, normal, or slow travel pace, how much distance you cover per minute, per hour, and per day. So if you're traveling at a normal pace, you cover 300 feet per minute, 3 miles per hour, or 24 miles per day. And then it also says what effect it has. Because a lot of people forget this, if you're traveling at certain paces, it does have an effect on your party's abilities. If you're traveling at a normal pace, you have disadvantage on stealth checks, just like while you're doing it, especially while you're out in the open, you aren't intentionally being stealthy and you're being a little bit loud about it, you know? Meanwhile, if you're traveling at a slow pace, you have advantage on perception or survival checks. So that sort of information, again, adds realism, is quick reference stuff that isn't usually memorized, and it's kind of an case by case basis. It's not often that your party is off traveling long distances over land, you know? Usually they're in dungeons. It's half the game's name, Dungeons and Dragons. That's part of it. And so it's just good to have that information there. It also talks about terrain too, which is not something I think I've seen before. I don't have that info on mine. It talks about how different types of terrain have a maximum pace that you can travel. For example, if you're traveling over grassland, you can go at any pace that you want. You can go fast, you can go slow, you can go normal pace. However, if you're traveling through mountainous terrain, you can only go at a slow traveling pace. You can't go faster than that just due to the nature of the terrain. Same with like the Underdark. You can't travel at a fast speed in the Underdark. You can only go slow pace or normal pace. So it kind of breaks down what the maximums there are, and also the encounter distance for different types of terrain. If you're on the coast, it's 2d10 times 10 feet. You're gonna roll a couple dice, figure out what the different effects on those potential parameters might be, and then kind of adjust your encounter distance accordingly. Next is the foraging DC. So it will tell you what you need to hit with a survival check in order to forage for food, water, resources of any kind. It gives you a little bit of a parameter for that. Same with navigation. It gives you a DC for what it takes to navigate over land. I assume also with a survival check, but of course this might change accordingly. So for example, if you're in a swamp, the DC to forage is a 10, so it would only take you a 10 or more in order to find some cool shrooms around or something like that. But the navigation DC is a little bit high. It's a 15, so you might have to hit a 15 or above in order to make sure that you're not getting lost and that you don't wander into some hag's hut by accident and become dinner instead of finding dinner. And then the last one is the search DC, which describes how hard it is to search that area using a wisdom check that might be, you know, insight, medicine, perception, or survival, just like the normal description of that action is. So for example, swamps are really hard. The search DC in a swamp is going to be 20. Again, these are all suggestions. You can modify it accordingly if there's any other parameters that might be affecting it. So for example, if you have a swamp, but it's your home territory, maybe the DC is a little lower for you, or you have advantage or something like that. So of course, everything's a suggestion, everything is malleable. Hey, Me again, here to tell you that this episode is brought to you by the amazing folks over at Monty Cook Games. If you've never heard of Monty Cook before, they're actually the people behind the Cypher system and the Old Gods of Appalachia role-playing game, and right now they are rolling out the perfect TTRPG supplement for horror enthusiasts called The Darkest Woods. The Darkest Woods is an amazing system, and it goes on top of whatever system you're already playing. It could be D&D, it could be Pathfinder, it could be anything else. No matter what system you're using, it gives you rules for converting your current party into the system of The Darkest Woods. And once they're there, they can start to explore the ancient woods where horrifying primal creatures await them. And I love this kind of horror so much, not just because woods exist in pretty much every system already, so it can integrate in like seamlessly to your world, but also because it invokes this ancient primal fear of the things that lie hidden in the shadows beneath the trees. I cannot express enough, the things in these woods are dark, they are dangerous, and they are watching. The Darkest Woods can be played as its own campaign as well if you don't want to integrate it into your world, and it provides premium immersion. Now when you get the Darkest Woods, it actually does this really awesome thing where all of the information comes with a QR code at the bottom of the page, or if you're using their digital app, because there is a digital app for Mac and PC as well, you can get assets like art, music, handouts that you can give to your players, and really get them like zoned into the horrors of the woods. And it's not just a smattering of random encounters either, there are secrets to be found. The party can gather information and face the challenges of the woods in order to escape before the woods consume them. But in trying to understand what exactly the primal entity of the woods is, it's gonna start to feed on their fears, their dark pasts, their memories, and it's gonna test your party's bonds like nothing else. That being said, if they come out alive on the other end, your party's members are gonna emerge more cohesive, they'll understand each other more deeply. And once your party emerges from the woods, they can switch back to their old character sheets for the system that they were using and have a seamless integration back into the regular game. Now, The Darkest Woods is available on Backer Kit right now, but only for like a couple more days, so I highly recommend checking it out while you still can. I'll have a link down below and in my bio if you need it. But if you back it now on Backer Kit before it's too late, you also get an additional supplement called The Darkest Road, which unlocks a new portion of The Darkest Woods and is only available through this campaign. This book looks amazing. The art is fantastic. The system is really easy to use. I've used it before with The Darkest House, and I can't thank Monty Cook enough for hopping in last minute to sponsor this video because I love their work immensely and I can't wait to get this when it comes out. Anyway, back to the normal video, the normal outfit, and the normal lighting. Now the last section covers cover, which again is one of those rules that I've never once memorized and I always need a reference for because I'm really bad at this. But it says the benefits of half cover, 3/4 cover, and total cover all listed out in table form for super quick reference. Like, so for example, if you have 3/4 cover, it says that the target who is beneath that cover has a 5 bonus to AC and dexterity saving throws. It's just quick reminders like that. Next up is audible distance, which is an interesting variant on stealth that I don't think is utilized all that often. It says if you are working at a normal noise level, for example, then someone can hear you from 2d6 times 10 feet away. If you're trying to be quiet, then it's 2d6 times 5 feet is how far people can hear you at. And then if you're being extremely loud, it's 2d6 times 50 feet. Obviously, I love this as a horror GM, but it is applicable to any type of dungeon, especially if it's inhabited and you as the DM want to see if any of the inhabitants are hearing the party as they move through. Then it also reminds you as the GM to ask your party how loud they're being and set them on edge a little bit with that question. Next up, they have visibility outdoors. So it talks about different types of weather, for example, rain, which causes light obfuscation, and then fog, also causing light obfuscation, and says the visible distance that your party will be at through those types of weather. So if it's raining, for example, people can see you from a mile away, assuming that there's nothing blocking your sight. Or for example, if it's a clear day and there's no obstructions, then someone can see you from 2 miles away on foot or from 40 miles away if they've got a bird's eye view. I think that stuff is super cool. And the last section here is the weather. So you can use it to roll for what the current day's weather is. You can roll a d20 and then it'll tell you what the temperature is, if it's normal for the season, if it's a little bit colder, if it's a little bit hotter. It is in Fahrenheit, I will say. I kind of wish they had Celsius as well for all of us who aren't, you know, using a god-awful Fahrenheit system for temperature. And then there's also another table where you roll a different d20 and it tells you what the wind is, so either none, light, or strong, and if there's precipitation. It's either light rain or light snowfall, or heavy rain or heavy snowfall. It's a little bit simplified. I kind of wish there were more options. So for example, if it gave you thunderstorms as a potential option, or even like a second table that you can roll on that you can use to come up with descriptions for weather, because I find that that's really difficult to do. If I roll and it's raining, I'm just gonna sit here and say, hey, it's raining. And I'm not good at improvising cool stuff like, oh, it's rainy, you can feel the slight tickle of a sprinkle of water on your brow as you trudge forward. Okay, maybe I am okay with it. Maybe I'm not that bad at it, but like still, I kind of wish there was a little bit more help when it came to descriptions in here overall. But the tools that it provides are very straightforward and very much just like handy at-a-glance information that you need within arm's reach when you're a DM. One thing I do wish that they had added and improved upon from the 2014 version was I wish they gave you more places for you to insert your own information. So especially when it comes to encounters and using the encounter cards that they sell, like these guys, you know these guys, right? These little creature and NPC cards are just one example. I've got a bunch of them actually that were sent my way, or spell cards or magic item cards, things like that. Having a place to kind of slide those into the inside of the DM screen, I feel like would be super helpful. I mean, in my DM screen, I can actually show you. Hold on. Aha. I have a published walkthrough of the inside of this somewhere, by the way, but this little pocket right here is what I use to slide in either encounter cards, NPC cards, magic item cards, and I slide them in an order of initiative if we're in combat, so that way I can kind of like move people around and keep track of initiative a little bit better. Magic item cards I have on hand, and then I can just slide it out and give it to the party member who finds that magic item. I feel like that's something that would have been really easy to implement in something like this and would be super helpful. I know that they have the file folder for, you know, full sheet size things, but I feel like synchronicity and the ability to use synergy is what I meant. I'm getting my corporate language mixed up. Oh my God. But being able to use cards like this would be incredibly helpful in conjunction with a DM screen like this. I feel like it would be a small suggested improvement, but other than that, there's not a whole lot that I need to say with regards to upgrades on the actual content of the DM screen. I think it's fantastic. I think it helps a lot when it comes to new DMs learning the rules, especially if you're not super experienced with D&D. I think it's a really easy way to kind of still be able to jump behind the screen and have everything that you need without having to flip through the DMG a bunch. I'm of the personal opinion that everyone needs a Dungeon Master screen of some variety, and this isn't a bad one if you don't want to like DIY it yourself. This took me like weeks in high school, by the way. This was a project. I just like it because I'm a control freak. But if you don't want to do that, or you don't have copious amounts of glue, duct tape, and gold paint, this is a really easy start. And I think it has pretty much everything you need, honestly. But I want to know what you guys think. Was there any information that you feel like could have been added to make things easier on new DMs? Do you feel like there was something that in here that was unnecessary? Let me know in the comments. I want to know what your guys' opinions are, because otherwise I'm in an echo chamber just by myself, talking alone in my apartment to absolutely no one and hearing no conflicting opinions. So, and listen, I know I'm not on YouTube much, but I know y'all are good at conflicting opinions, so I probably shouldn't insult YouTube while I'm here, huh? I'm getting used to it. I'm getting better. Anyway, I guess I'm gonna go get a snack, because I have been recording here for like 2 hours. I don't know how people sustain this, dude. How the hell does Jimmy D do